Dave, and this is Logan, out once again on a walk in the countryside. Thanks for joining us. Today we're at the pretty village of Cocking in West Sussex, which lies at the foot of the South Downs, just a few miles to the south of the town of Midhurst, just off the A286. And today we'll be doing a 4-mile circular route, basically up to the top of the downs, across and back down again. We'll have a little look at a few things in the village, and there's some interesting things to look at along the way. So do join us. Well, we're going to start our walk by the pretty little church that's in the village. Let me turn round to show you, and there it is. Well, the oldest part is 11th century, but most of the church is 12th to 14th century, with some substantial additions in the 19th century. And there was possibly a wooden church here as far back as 680, but for 900 years it had no dedication to a saint at all and was simply known as Cocking Parish Church. But in 2007 it was dedicated to St. Catherine of Siena, an Italian woman who lived in the 1300s and dedicated her short life to serving the sick and the poor. And the dedication was chosen as one of the church's 3 medieval bells is inscribed with her name. It only has one stained glass window, and I should say something about the font. Well, a couple of things actually. Firstly, it's quite old, 12th century, although the church guide suggests it might even be older than that. But also, I was baptised in it. Well over half a century ago, so I don't remember too much about the occasion. Well, the Domesday Book mentions Cocking, and in fact it had a church and 5 mills. In fact, just behind me here we can still just about make out through the foliage there the mill pond, or one of the mill ponds, and that's fed from a stream called Costa's Brook that rises from a spring not far from here. And then if I quickly just turn round, we can see the stream flowing north. It eventually finds its way into the River Rother. So it's a very small village, Cocking. I think the 2011 census gave it a population of 420. But that is your traditional chalk downland stream, free flowing with crystal clear water. Well, just outside the church is the War Memorial, which you can see just here behind me. That was originally erected in 1920 in the garden of the head teacher's house, but it moved to this present location in 1959. And if we just wander over here, just by this seat here, this is Costa's Brook again. And again, the spring is literally yards away from here. Water flows from underneath the chalk downs, which we're just about to go up. Now, just before we leave the village, there's one little cottage I want to see first. Ah, there we go. That's what I was looking for. This is Tudor Cottage. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where I spent the first 11 months of my life. My parents rented it. I think it was their first house that they had together. Obviously I don't remember too much about it. Oh, it's quite sweet. First time I've been back in, 58 years or so. I expect at some stage in the future there'll be a blue plaque on it. Although, don't you have to be dead for 20 years before they give you a blue plaque? Well, hopefully it'll be a long time then. Okay, we're now at the very foot of the South Downs, about to start to make our ascent. Feeling fit? Let's go. There we go, restricted byway. And this is going to be a little chalk path that's going to hopefully take us all the way to the top. Whew, we're about halfway up, so good excuse for a little breather. Just show you something along the way. We're not going to be able to see too much through here, but we're close to an old limeworks which is to the west of the path. It was abandoned back in 1999, and as I just come up here you can just see a few remnants left of it here through this undergrowth. We're not going to go in because it's private land. In fact, this area was known as the Butts on an ordnance survey map, possibly used for archery practice in the 12th century. There's also a chalk pit nearby which is evidence of lime working back to 1715. In fact, there was a connection with Midhurst brickworks, who produced the famous Midhurst white bricks using sand from Midhurst and lime from here. Brick production at Midhurst stopped in the 1980s, and lime here was then just used for agricultural purposes. There were 8 lime kilns in total. I think there are now plans for the area to become a campsite for folk using the South Downs Way, but a fair few buildings need to be demolished first. We've made it to the top, although having said that, I think we've got a little bit more uphill walking to do later on. This is Manor Farm, so there's a noise in the background. I think there's a timber business here as well. To show you around, firstly it looks like they sometimes sell ice cream here, and then there's our sign confirming that we're on the South Downs Way. If we just go over here, there's a little fresh water station, a cocking tap. That tells us the next one is 11 miles to the east at Amberley. And it looks like they've got a little water bowl for dogs, and there's the tap there. And just to point out, a lot of the properties around here have this yellow or gold paint on them, and that's Cowdery gold, and that signifies that they're part of the Cowdery estate. Right, well, we're going to carry on heading along the flat. Oh, lovely little, what are those called? Shepherd's huts, aren't they? And that track in the very, very far distance, and the top of the hill there, that's our next destination. We've just crossed the A286 and heading west, still on the South Downs Way. In case you know, that's a long distance trail. I think it's about 100 miles, isn't it, from Winchester in the west all the way down to Eastbourne in the east. And let's pan round to show you some of the views that I'm looking at now as we're heading forward. Plenty of sheep in the field. Now, I should say I'm crossing over a railway tunnel. And in fact, if I pan back into those woods just over in the far distance, that's the northern end of the tunnel. It was a disused railway track from Chichester to Midhurst, run by the London and Brighton and South Coast Railway, opened in 1881. Passenger trains were withdrawn in 1935, and freight services continued from along parts of the line until the early to mid 1950s. And I said the line goes through a tunnel, probably literally right underneath me. I think it's about 738 yards long or so, and hopefully we'll be able to see the northern end of the tunnel later on in our walk. Oh, you're a pair of cuties, aren't you? Oh, some geese over there as well. I don't know. We've come all the way from the New Forest, where there are hundreds of ponies and some little Shetlands there. Now, there's a lot of sheep about on this walk, so for the next section I'm going to keep Logan on a lead. it's not a problem, but I noticed a few of the sheep are actually on the track, so I need to be a little bit careful. Well, we're continuing with our second mini ascent. Oh, what have we got here? Looks like we can pick up some honey. Elderflower cordial. Very nice too. What do you reckon, Logan? Right, now we're still very much on the South Downs way, and from time to time I can have a little peep over. We are starting to get some stunning views looking to the north. And just here on my left there's a Bronze Age barrow. Not a particularly big one, but there's a couple on this route. And we've just now come off a farm track, and now the track has become much more of a, well, almost like an old drove track, still on chalk though. We've now reached the highest point on our walk, and from here we really do get some stunning views. The sun seems to have gone in. I might wait a bit and see if I can get some decent pictures when the sun comes out. But again, that's looking south, and then that's looking east, and very, very far distance you can probably see the chalk pit, or the face of the old chalk pit that's disused. Now, speaking of chalk, you'll notice this whopping great big boulder that's sitting next to me. And this is a chalk ball, and it is supposed to be here. It's one of 13 chalk balls that form a chalk stone walking trail of about 5 miles from Bepton in the north to Westdean in the south. And it's sculptured by the environmental artist Andy Goldsworthy. And they're supposed to represent the link between the landscape and the geology of the South Downs. And the idea is that they're expected to break down over time, and they'll eventually disappear. But there's no plaque or information board, so unless you'd read up about it beforehand, you wouldn't know what they were. But it's a nice chalk ball, isn't it? Well, we've now left the South Downs way, and I'm going to start heading back north, basically back to Cocking village. So a downhill stretch now, and we're going to follow the side of a plantation. On the map is called Stead Coombe, and looks like it's going to be a bit dark in there. So quite a variety of trees as well. We've got beech and oak, but also, interestingly enough, intertwined in here are quite a few yew trees, which I wasn't expecting. Yeah, here we go. Some more. There's a row of yew trees lining the bank of the path here, which makes this walk a little bit atmospheric. And if I just get up onto the bank, there's quite a steep drop into a valley down there. And at one stage there was a Victorian volunteer rifle range down there, originally built up in the 1860s, and it shows on very old maps. and it was used still by the Chichester Home Guard during the Second World War, but I believe the range closed in the 1950s. Right, step off this bank. Ooh, we're back on and carry on downhill back towards the village. Well, just as we come down this side of the plantation, we've got some cracking views north, and once again black downhill in the very far distance, but just a little bit nearer I can just make out the town of Midhurst, and oh, I think that's the Cowdery golf course in the very far distance. Everything's looking so green now. Some quite exquisite views from here. Beautiful. Beautiful scenic views looking south, and that's where we've just come down from, and then panning round. We're on the outskirts of Crypt Farm, a lovely white building there. I'm now going to follow through. Before we pass completely out of the farm, I just want to show you that northern tunnel of the disused railway line. Aha, and here we go. So don't fall down there, Logan. This is therefore the northern end of the tunnel. I believe it's a special scientific interest, or site of special scientific interest. It's used by bats, so there's, if I'm aware, no public access, but as you can see there's some scaffolding there. I did read last year that they were trying to open up the old line as a cycle route all the way from Chichester to Midhurst, and at the moment the line is open up to Lavender. I think it's called the Centurion Way, but I say they're clearly doing some work on it. Like I say, we're not going to go down there. I'm not 100% sure if it's on private land or not, so we'll stay up here on the footpath. Well, we're now back onto a hard surface road not far from the village, and that's that lovely white house again. I'd say that's one for the short list if I ever win the lottery. But just to the side here, and I'll see if I can poke the camera through, because this is private land down here, but it's absolutely beautiful sunken pond and a little bridge there, very much home to a number of species of ducks. Speaking of which, if I just pan back and past this tree, and there they are over in the distance there, out for their morning constitutional. Now passing underneath the old railway line now. The Victorians, they certainly knew how to build bridges, didn't they? And when you think this is just purely going over a road that went just to a single farm, and it was certainly built to last, wasn't it? And the railway station, or Cocking railway station, is just to the left of me. It's now a private house. You can't actually get on there or look at the line, but wow, that's a pretty significant structure. Well, we're back in the village now, and there's one more thing that I want to show you, and that's just here. This is the Cocking history column. As you can see, it's about 3 meters high, made of bronze and sits on a Portland stone plinth, and it's part of the Cocking Village Millennium celebrations, unveiled in 2005. Something like 48 bronze panels sort of winding their way down, recording the history of the village from the Bronze Age going forwards, and there's a couple of maps of the village, or parish maps, on the plinth. But isn't that wonderful? I mean, I don't think, and it's quite 3D-ish, if you know what I mean. That really is quite special. You can spend quite a bit of time here learning about the village. Well folks, we've come to the end of our walk. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up or like, and do make a comment. And if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe. That way hopefully you'll be able to join us for another walk sometime in the future. Now I reckon, looking back on our records, we've done 50 walks now together in this series, 41 in the New Forest and the rest Hampshire, Dorset and Sussex. So are we ready for the next 50? Anyway, until we meet again, thanks for watching and cheerio.